Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for September the 11th. Today, we are reading together in 1 Kings chapter 16, which is going to detail for us a number of kings that came and went in the the northern portion of the nation of Israel. We'll be reading about King Baasha, King Elah, King Zimri, King Omri, and then finally King Ahab is going to be introduced, and he's going to have a large part to play in the upcoming chapters, along with his horrible wife, Jezebel. So let me go to get the text up on the screen for us of 1 Kings chapter 16, and we're going to back up to a few verses back in chapter 15, where, probably would have been a little better for the chapter to begin, since we're just transitioning from king to king. So we're going to start reading in chapter 15 of 1 Kings and verse number 33. 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 33, in the third year of Judah's king Asa, Baasha, son of Ahijah, became king over all Israel. He reigned in Tirzah 24 years. He did what was evil in Yahweh's sight and walked in the ways of Jeroboam and the sin he had caused Israel to commit. Now the word of Yahweh came to Jehu, son of Hanani, against Baasha, because I raised you up from the dust and made you ruler over my people Israel, but you have walked in the ways of Jeroboam and have caused my people Israel to sin, angering me with their sins. Take note, I will eradicate Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Anyone who belongs to Baasha and dies in the city, the dogs will eat, and anyone who is his and dies in the field, the birds will eat. The rest of the events of Baasha's reign, along with all his accomplishments and might, are recorded in the historical record of Israel's kings. Baasha rested with his ancestors and was buried in Tirzah. His son Elah became king in his place. But through the prophet Jehu, son of Hanani, the word of Yahweh also had come against Baasha and against his house because of all the evil he had done in Yahweh's sight. His actions angered Yahweh, and Baasha's house became like the house of Jeroboam, because he had struck it down. In the 26th year of Judah's king Asa, remember all this is taking place during the single reign of Judah, the southern portion of Israel, which is known as Judah. Their king Asa reigned, I think, for 41 years, if I remember correctly. And during that time, we have a number of kings that came and went in Israel. One of those, again, being Elah, son of Baasha, became king over Israel, and he reigned in Tirzah 2 years. 1 Kings chapter 16, verse number 9, his servant Zimri, commander of half of his chariots, conspired against him while Elah was in Tirzah getting drunk in the house of Arza, who was in charge of the household at Tirzah. In the 27th year of Judah's king Asa, Zimri went in and struck down Elah, and struck Elah down, killing him. Then Zimri became king in his place. When he became king, as soon as he was seated on his throne, Zimri struck down the entire house of Baasha. He did not leave a single male, including his kinsmen and his friends. So Zimri destroyed the entire house of Baasha, according to the word of Yahweh he had spoken against Baasha through the prophet Jehu. This happened because of all the sins of Baasha and those of his son Elah, which that they had committed and caused Israel to commit, angering Yahweh, God of Israel, with their worthless idols. The rest of the events of Elah's reign, along with all his accomplishments, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. In the 27th year of Judah's king Asa, Zimri became king for 7 days in Tirzah. Now the troops were encamped against Gibbethon of the Philistines. When those troops heard that Zimri had not only conspired but also struck down the king, then all Israel made Omri, the army commander, king over Israel, and that very day in the camp. Omri, along with all Israel, marched up from Gibbethon and besieged Tirzah. When Zimri saw that the city was captured, he entered the citadel of the royal palace and burned it down over himself. He died because of the sin he committed by doing what was evil in Yahweh's sight, and by walking in the ways of Jeroboam and the sin he had caused Israel to commit. The rest of the events of Zimri's reign, along with the conspiracy that he instigated, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. At that time, the people of Israel were divided. Half the people followed Timni, son of Ginath, to make him king, and half followed Omri. However, the people who followed Omri proved stronger than those who followed Timni, son of Ginath. So Timni died, and Omri became king. In the 31st year of Judah's king Asa, Omri became king over Israel, and he reigned 12 years. He reigned 6 years in Tirzah. Then he bought the hill of Samaria from Shemir for 150 pounds of silver and built up the hill. He named the city he built Samaria based on the name Shemir, the owner of the hill. Omri did what was evil in Yahweh's sight. He did more evil than all who were before him. He walked in the ways of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, in every respect, and continued in his sins that he caused Israel to commit, angering Yahweh, God of Israel, with their worthless idols. The rest of the events of Omri's reign, along with his accomplishments and the might he exercised, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. Omri rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria, and his son Ahab became king in his place. Ahab, son of Omri, became king over Israel in the 38th year of Judah's king Asa. Ahab, son of Omri, reigned over Israel and Samaria 22 years. But Ahab, son of Omri, did what was evil in Yahweh's sight more than all who were before him. Then, as if following the sin of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, were not enough, he married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and then proceeded to serve Baal and bow and worship to him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he had built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole. Ahab did more to anger Yahweh, God of Israel, than all the kings of Israel who were before him. And during his reign, Hiel, the Bethelite, built Jericho at the cost of Abiram, his firstborn. He laid its foundation, and at the cost of Segub, his youngest, he finished its gates, according to the word of Yahweh he had spoken through Joshua, son of Nun. And that is 1 Kings chapter 16. Again, during all this time that we read of what's taking place in chapter 16, from Baasha to Elah to Zimri to Omri to Ahab, during those 5 kings, we're going to see all of them taking place during the reign of the southern king, went blank here, during the southern of Asa, the southern king Asa reigned again for like 4 decades or so. And during his time, we're seeing all these kings who are in Judah show up and come and go in the northern kingdom. I just remembered I did not post that picture of the screenshot of the ledger that has all the different kings. So once we get off here today, I will go and post that in the comments on the previous video, so you can look at that. And I'll try to do my best I can to keep posting that picture, just so you can have that to look at as you're listening to today's reading. We're beginning though with Baasha. This man was the son of Ahijah, and he is the next king over, let's see, the northern portion of Israel. Let's see, he is number 3. First it was Jeroboam, then there was Nadab, and then there is Baasha. Baasha did not do what was right in Yahweh's sight. And there's really the theme I want us to recognize here within the text. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, so there's a main theme that runs throughout each of these kings as best I could tell. And the theme is they angered Yahweh. Their actions angered Yahweh. We see this first in verse number 7. We see it again in verse number 13. That's for, let's see, that is for Elah. Then for Zimri, I don't actually think it shows up in Zimri's particular section, because I don't think he was really king long enough to actually anger Yahweh in a substantial way. But then we do see with Omri in verse number 26. And finally, we also see this in verse number 33 of 1 Kings 16. So that's the main themes. Let's just talk about how each of these individuals angered Yahweh. The way he angered Yahweh, referring to Baasha, is that he walked in the ways of Jeroboam. He walked in the ways of Jeroboam, and the sin that he had caused Israel to commit. Remember, Jeroboam's issue is that he set up these altars in Dan and in Bethel, And he did so with the golden calves and presented them to the people as these are the gods that rescued you out of Egypt. So he set up a paganistic style of worship for Yahweh. And for that, he is going to be judged in a very severe way, so much so that his entire household is going to be wiped out. We'll also note that he is punished for having killed, let me double check this. Yeah, for having killed the entire household of Jeroboam, which might sound a little strange because if we remember correctly, God said that Jeroboam's household was going to be erased. So why would God punish Baasha for doing what he prophesied would happen? Well, probably because what Baasha was doing was not killing and wiping out the household of Jeroboam and his son Nadab in order to fulfill Yahweh's commands, a matter of justice, but he did it basically just straight murder, just killed everybody because they belonged to the previous dynasty. And that's one of the issues that we're going to see here a lot, is that we see as each of these new lineages, as each of these new dynasties comes up in Israel, they do a lot of what we see dynasties historically doing. Once a new dynasty comes into power, they wipe out the previous dynasty. Now, we did not see that, though, in the previous changing of dynasties that took place within the United Kingdom. Whenever David came to rule over Israel, he did not wipe out the dynasty of Saul. He showed compassion and kindness towards Saul's household. Once we get here, though, to Israel of the divided kingdom, that type of courtesy and mercy is just thrown out the door. For Baasha destroys Jeroboam's house, and then we have next Zimri, or excuse me, it goes Jeroboam and his son Nadab are kings. Then there's the next dynasty that begins with Baasha, and Baasha and Elah are kings, but both of them are individuals who were evil in Yahweh's sight. And again, Yahweh said he's going to wipe them out. So whenever Zimri rebels and brings about a coup, basically, by killing Elah while he was drunk in Tirzah, he wiped out that lineage as well. So now the lineage of Jeroboam and Nadab, gone. The lineage of Baasha and Elah, gone. Now Zimri, he's the new king, and he's the one who is in charge. Again, he's not in charge for a very long time at all. 7 days, in fact. And basically the reason it was 7 days because it took 7 days for this news to travel, that Zimri had killed Elah and that he was the new king. Well, the army doesn't seem to like that, so they have this commander of the army, Omri. He becomes now the king. He actually goes and marches against Tirzah, which is the capital city of Israel at this time, where Zimri is, and he besieges Tirzah. And Zimri takes the coward's way out by setting the compound on fire, the citadel of the royal palace. He sets it on fire and kills himself in the process. So he basically ruins the city, which might be one of the reasons why we're going to see in a bit that Omri ends up moving the capital city from Tirzah and to Samaria. But again, Zimri, he dies. Omri takes over as king, although we need to note verses 20 through 22 in the fact that the people were split at that time. There were some people who followed Timni, the son of Ginath, and then there were others that followed Omri. Well, the people who followed Omri were stronger than those who followed Timni, so they end up establishing Omri as the king over Israel. The text tells us that he reigned 12 years. 6 of those years he reigned in Tirzah. The rest of those years he reigned in Samaria. And many people have looked at the reign of Omri and have actually seen him as not an echo of David, but kind of a opposite echo of David, where they both had similar backgrounds, similar storylines. Both of them were commanders of armies. Both of them reigned in split capital cities. David moved the capital city at some point during his reign, moved it up so that it would be in Jerusalem. That's what Omri does as well. He moves from Tirzah to Samaria. Both are engaged in battles against the Philistines. But instead of there being great success spiritually, as there was a lot during David's time, there was a great lot of spiritual failure during the reign of Omri. But that's not what a lot of people focus on. When they think about Omri, they focus on the fact that he was very politically strong. He had a lot of political success. In fact, the reign of Omri is attested a great deal in extra biblical writings. I believe there is something called the Moabite Stone. I believe Omri's name is mentioned there. It's called the land of Israel is referred to as the land of Omri in some extra biblical writings because he was just that successful during the time of his reign. But again, even with that being the case, he angered Yahweh, God of Israel, with his worthless idols. He did even more than all. He did even more evil than all who came before him. So those who are leading Israel, they're not leading Israel closer to God, but they're failing and actually pushing people further away from God. They're not seeking to establish a strong relationship between God and his people, unfortunately. After Omri comes the infamous Ahab, who is said to have done more evil in the sight of Yahweh than all who were before him. And it wasn't even just that he followed in the sin of Omri. It's not he not only followed in the sin of Jeroboam, which remember that is the pattern way in which the evil of the Israelite kings is described. They followed in the way of Jeroboam. But he didn't just do that. Its text said he did even more than that by marrying Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, the king of the Sidonians. You know it's bad whenever a marriage is described as being worse than paganistic worship of Yahweh. That's how bad this marriage was. Particularly, that's how bad the two individuals who were engaged in this marriage were. How bad was Ahab? Well, he certainly allowed Jezebel's influence to lead him to serve the Baals, to bow in worship to the pagan god Baal. He even set up an altar for Baal, not just an altar for Baal, but he set up a temple for Baal there in Samaria. He even made an Asherah pole. Again, he did more to anger Yahweh, God of Israel, than all the kings of Israel who were before him. He is a bad, bad dude doing a ton of wicked deeds. One of those things that's mentioned here in the text, kind of random, but we have this reference back to Joshua chapter 6 verse 26, is whenever he seemingly, I'm going to believe that since this is described as being during his reign, he commissioned this to take place, that Hiel, the Bethelite, went to rebuild Jericho. But remember, Joshua cursed Jericho, and he prophesied that if anybody tries to build Jericho, then they're going to do it at the expense of their firstborn, and they're going to do it at the expense of their lastborn as well. And that's exactly what we see with this man Hiel. His firstborn son Abiram is killed whenever it comes to the foundation, and there's some different thoughts as to what happened. Some might say that this was just a random death that took place. Others say that actually this was kind of a paganistic worship type of activity, that they would actually kill the person, normally a child, there at the foundation in order to accrue the blessing of whichever pagan deity it was that they were worshiping in the building of this place. And then we see as well that his youngest, Segub, he also was killed, again, maybe the same along the same lines at the finishing of the gates. So again, everything that touches Ahab turns poorly. It does not turn to gold. It turns evil and wicked. And this is just the beginning of the wickedness that we're going to see from Ahab, his wife Jezebel. And we're going to see the conflict that exists between him and then the prophets of God. Elijah is going to be the first one here on the scene that we'll be looking at here over the next few days as we read through the end of First Kings. Let me see here. First Kings has a total of, I want to say it's 24 chapters. Let's see, 22 chapters. So we have about a week's worth of text left to read here in First Kings. And then sometime in the next week and a half or so, or next week or so, let's see here. It would be next Monday, it looks like. A week from today, we'll be getting into Second Kings. If you have any questions or comments about this text, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And again, the theme of this text is angering God. And they angered him through their rebellion. They angered him through their paganistic worship of him. And what's most sad about this is that nobody learned from the previous ruler. Nobody learned from the previous ruler's mistakes so they could do what is right in Yahweh's sight and prosper. Instead, they continue to pursue their own ways and continue to lead to their destruction. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave that below. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their Monday, and we'll look forward to reading with everybody tomorrow from 1 Kings chapter 17. Hope to see you then. Take care. God bless.